Okay. Are we broadcasting?
Never better.
Yes.
Welcome to the Affordable Housing Trust meeting of June 23rd, 2020. Present are Kate Fitzpatrick, Town Manager, myself, the Chair, Mo Handel, Karen Sonneborg, our consultant, John Bullion, Matt Borelli, Dan Matthews, and Marianne Cooley, all members of the Select Board, Avery Newton, and Lee Newman. Have I left anybody out? This meeting is being conducted consistent with the remote meeting regulations adopted due to the coronavirus emergency. The first item on our agenda is the status of the Housing Trust Fund.
Last year we received, well, as of the end of last year, there was a total $16,097.80. The $50,000 that was allocated to the small repair grant program was not deposited into the Affordable Housing Fund, but instead county decided to put it into another account. We have projected 2020 funds for a total of $6,879.30. About $2,400 of that amount is for the resale fee for a High Rock condo that we coordinated last year for 258 Linden Street. The seller, the winning lottery winner, we offered the unit to this person, and they were declined financing despite having a mortgage pre-approval in their application. And then the seller informed us that they wanted to defer the actual sale due to personal reasons for another year. I contacted her recently and she said she still didn't have a firm timeline on that. So we're just kind of in holding pattern on that one. And the other amounts include monitoring fees, and I'll get to that when we get to that item in the agenda.
Thank you. Are there any questions on that? Thank you. That was Karen Sonneborg. I failed to mention that this meeting is being recorded, so anything that is said or shared will be a matter of public record. Small repair grant program.
Yes, we're in the second round of funding. Applications are technically due June 30th. There have been a sizable number of inquiries from folks. And, you know, given COVID, I have gotten back in touch. I've gotten in touch with the people who've responded and asked for an application, saying that if they were encountering some challenges in pulling together all the required materials for the application, they should let me know. And I have heard from several people who say that they really are having difficulties, particularly those who are just asking for an application recently. With that in mind, I wanted to just mention a couple of recommendations for changing the program requirements. And one was, because of COVID, to either extend the deadline applications when applications are due, or to move to a rolling process. So we'll accept applications as they are compiled and turned in. And I have the list of all the people who have inquired about the project, have gotten a an application. I could easily get back to them and explain any changes in the timeline. So that's one thing that we wanted to discuss tonight. There are some other recommendations, but I think that one's the most important one. The other ones include that we have in the income qualifications that you have to have incomes at or below 80% of area median income. We also adopted a measure that was included as pretty standard in a lot of the other programs, which was to add 2% of the difference between the total assessed value and any liens on the property to the income level. I got to say the 2%, that 2% requirement is usually for programs that have the income cap at 100% of area median income. And from conversations from folks in the first round, I know that that 2% level kept a couple of folks out of qualifying for the program. So one recommendation was just to eliminate that 2% addition to the income qualification standard. Another suggestion was that to maybe increase the maximum grant for any funding round from 4,000 to 5,000 based on the applicants that we have so far. We have 4 participants. Several of them could have really benefited from a little bit of higher grant, and all of them had very low incomes. So that's another consideration. This $5,000 amount is pretty standard in the other programs. So that's another thing to just keep in mind. And I just also wanted to mention that we did recently send letters to all the current participants, asking to give us the status of where they are, and to also impress on them that we're sensitive to the COVID crisis, and that they may not really want at this time to have contractors roaming around their homes, and to keep in touch with them. We wanted to keep in touch with them, and if they needed a little bit more time, that we could be sensitive to that. So we're trying to still, maintain communication with the current participants. And most of them have delayed the actual work, although I think we're going to get our first, all the information materials for making a first payment through the program for one of the participants. So anyway, so that's what I have for the small repair grant program. It'd be great to get some comments on the recommendations.
Karen, you gave us 3 recommendations.
Yes.
One of them, it seems to me, is time sensitive, the first one. Are the
Yes.
other 2?
What are the other 2?
The eliminate the 2% and increase the maximum grant.
Right.
Are they time sensitive? Are they
No.
time?
No, they would, I think, be outside of this funding round. So since we already put out, well, I think it's up to you, actually. When I think about it, it's a policy decision. Right. So I think you could go both ways. We did formally issue an application, but doesn't mean that you can't make changes, such as changing the timeline. I think you could also make changes, although I wouldn't recommend doing it for this funding round.
So, Mr. Chair, I would think that we could give you a draft, depending on the board comments, we could give you a draft of a new guidance document for review at another meeting. But I do think an extension, maybe 30 days, Karen, or for the applications for this round? I think 30 days is enough, or 60 days?
I think 30 days is okay.
So if we're to take up the 3 recommendations, but grant a 30-day extension, are there any questions or comments about that from any of the other members of the Housing Trust?
Could I just mention that part of the recommendations is also to move to a rolling basis.
Okay. Yes, thank you. I saw Mr. Borelli and Mr. Bullion. Matt, did you? And then Mr. Matthews.
Sure. I think in just in this brief conversation, I would support the 2% in raising the amount, and we can talk about that because it's not time sensitive at the next meeting. My concern would be if we've already told people, they're under the impression that the 2% is going to affect them and they would not reapply. So I'd like to actually separate this round, and then in the new one, start with the new rules so everyone can reapply, and then make a point of it that we know we have different requirements than we did before. So please apply even if you haven't received funding before. Fine with extending. I don't know if 30 days is enough. I'd be happy to go 60, but Karen, it sounds like I just wouldn't want to redo this again in 30 days because things haven't gotten any better. So I'd rather, yep.
I think that some people want to get going on it sooner if they could.
Okay.
So waiting 60 days to get awarded, that might be a problem unless
Sure.
I could just
Nope.
go ahead and approve them before that period. So
Sure. I trust your judgment on that. So yes, Mr. Chair, I'm fine with the recommendations, but I guess tonight, we'll talk more about the time-sensitive one about extending that deadline.
All right, Marianne, I'm going to call on you. I didn't see you when you had raised your hand before. I apologize. It's row-centric.
We need to figure out what our mechanism is for doing hands. So I just wanted to make a first observation, which is that it would be really helpful to me, unless I missed it somewhere, I didn't see it attached, I don't think, to the email, just a balance of the fund at any given time. I know that Karen gave us an oral reporting of it that I was madly trying to capture as she was saying it. So it would be useful to have that in front of us.
Yep.
And I would have also loved to have seen sort of a reporting of who participated in the first round of funding, given that we're now looking at the second and you're asking us some questions from a policy perspective. It would be useful to know, who came in with what kinds of proposals, what did they look like that guide and support a recommendation for moving to $5,000. Having said all that, the answer is I would be supportive certainly of extending by 30 days. I'm not certain that I'm ready to move to a rolling mechanism. I'd probably want to look at quarterly rather than rolling, because if we get to the point where we got a number of applications, then we would actually have to make choices about who to award money to. And rolling sort of presumes that there's always a pool of money there to be given out. So that's my
Thanks.
observation.
John?
I will echo exactly what Marianne said with respect to concerns about the rolling. I think that sometimes it's better to have applications known to come in and to be weighed against all applications. And I think there's a benefit to that. The other concern I would have about rolling is how does it impact the ability for staff to administrate and ultimately move forward if there's a constant stream of applications on a year-round basis. So other than that, I'm open to the recommendations that Karen and Kate come forward with. Thank you.
Thanks. Dan?
Yeah, I think I would want to understand before talking about having a rolling date, what that would really work like in terms of additional burden for the staff or administrative problems handling the program. In terms of changing the limits or the funding rules, I'd want to see some text for that. So that can go to the next meeting. I agree with what Marianne has said about certain kinds of reporting, which it would be good to have a brief, not overly detailed, but a summary report of where we stand to date in terms of available funds, what kinds of applications we've had and have been awarded. Some of that may have already gone by me in the blur, but I don't have a note of it. I don't have it here. Then on one question that's come up though about this 30 or 60 days, we're in a little bit of an unusual window. And I think the suggestion I would raise would be, I would be willing to say, okay, have an extension for 30 days and then with awards after that, and leave applications open for what we'll call late filed applications can be taken for another 30 days after that, subject to availability of funds. So if the grants have gone out and there's no funding available, well, okay, that's just the way that it is. But if somebody, if you get out at day 45 or so and somebody gets a late application in and there's still unawarded funds for this round, then I think those could be considered on their own merits. So
you'll get back to us on that, Karen. Does anybody else want to weigh in on this? Kate?
Well, I think we need to decide tonight for the 30-day extension.
Right.
And as Dan proposed, and in addition, perhaps allow late filed applications for another 30 days. I think that that would really help us, and then we can get back to you with the draft text for either a rolling or a quarterly.
Is that in the form of a motion, Kate? You remember this?
Dan made it.
Second.
Okay, then that's a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? Mary Ann?
So I was just going to say that I support Dan's idea of the second rolling day, 30-day window. That seems like a reasonable alternative to me.
Those to me too. Any other comments or questions before we vote the motion? Hearing none, we come to the vote. John,
Yes.
Kate,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Mary Ann?
Yes.
Am I leaving anybody out on the voting?
Avery.
Yes, Avery.
Avery. Oh, hi, Avery. I apologize.
No problem. Yes.
Okay. Did you have any other comments you care to make on any of this? I didn't call.
No,
it.
no, I think everything that I had written down here was covered. So no, nothing else for me.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, so we're going to extend the deadline with a provision for other applications that may miss depending on availability. And we come now to monitoring.
Okay. So monitoring has been a mixed bag. There's been issues with COVID coupled with significant staff changes where we've had some gaps, despite the fact that all the formal requests for documentation went out early in January, and we've made, continuous requests for the required documentation in order to complete this year's monitoring. We were able to get all the monitoring work on the older 40Bs done well within several months. We have the documentation for the affordable unit at Needham Place. A problem has been Wingate, and Wingate, there's 7 units, 2 in one phase and 5 in the other. Almost every year in the last several years, there have been staff turnovers, and I typically meet with them. I do a training on the requirements. I review when they have turnover, I review all the applications, etc. But this year, we still don't have the documentation, although so I got an email and they have the materials. They just emailed me the documents for 6, supposedly, I haven't reviewed it, 6 of the affordable units. They're having trouble still with 1. At the same time, they sent me all the documentation for a new application for me to review and approve. So I'm glad that they're at least sending some information our way. So that should be okay. Hopefully we'll be able to get everything together soon, because we want to invoice for the monitoring. And then we'll also be able to send a report to the DHCD every year. They want to see the monitoring results for Wingate in tandem with Needham Place. So we're anxious to get that in. It's been a long haul, and not not pleasant to keep bugging people. In regard to Greendale Village, we have the compliance report that they submit. The monitoring agent, Metro West Collaborative Development, submits to the state. For Webster Street Green, the monitoring agent is Housing Solutions, and this gal has been slow, but typically responsive in the past. I still haven't gotten her actual copy of her compliance report. She just sent me an email and said, there are no changes. This should be sufficient. So, I there you go. I keep telling her I need the full report to submit. Anyway, we'll see. Charles River Landing, they expect to have their monitoring done before Labor Day. The Kendrick and Modera, the state is in control of the of monitoring for those two developments. Hamilton Highlands, about a year ago, they went through a turnover of the affordable island, affordable unit there. That was formerly Webster Green. It's renamed Hamilton Highlands. They have had a annual turnover of staff too, and I have contacted the current guy a couple of times and haven't heard anything from him. Hopefully we'll get some response within the next couple of weeks. So it's been kind of frustrating. We're close, but we're not still there yet entirely.
Aaron, do we have any teeth? Do we have any
Well,
leverage?
on Wingate, Lee suggested, and I think we're getting, I have to review the documents they send me, but it looks like as of an hour ago, we have most of what we need. But Lee was saying, this monitoring was part of, and their release of documentation was part of the special permit conditions. So she was suggesting, go ahead, Lee.
I was going to say, the planning board holds a special permit for Wingate. So there is leverage there under the terms of the special permit. And we had talked about utilizing that leverage in the event that we didn't get compliant.
Right.
How serious are they likely to take that? I mean, what happens if they lose their special permit? They lose their occupancy permit?
Well, I think
Go ahead.
I think it's an embarrassing process, and I don't think that they really want to be in front of the planning board not having complied with this. I think it was just going to be a stick to get them to move in the right direction.
Okay. Any questions for Karen on this item? Let's move on to the home program issues.
So here we go again with staff changes and COVID. We are responsible for monitoring 1285 South Street. And I worked in the last number of years with a staff at Charles River Center who was terrific. And they had a change of staff, and despite formal requests, we weren't getting anywhere. The monitoring the deadlines have been made a lot more flexible given COVID and federal guidelines. And so the home consortium, who we report to on monitoring, has received kind of a waiver from HUD on these monitoring deadlines. And I submitted the entire due diligence that we did from the first letter to the ongoing communication on our attempts to try to get some kind of a response from the Charles River Center. We do this annual inspection of the property, and we were able to complete that. It's just getting the lease and income documentation on the 5 tenants, which are still outstanding. The other home-related issue I wanted to talk about was the consolidated plan. We just, over the last number of months, went through a new planning process for the 5-year strategic plan as part of the home consortium, and that funding for fiscal year 21 through 25. That included a market analysis and a needs assessment and kind of a strategic plan. We were able to, I think, emphasize the new initiatives that the town has embarked on with respect to greater housing, affordability and diversity, highlighting the approvals for 1180 Great Plain Avenue, for example, the accessory dwelling unit bylaw, the mixed use overlay district in the 128 Highland Avenue area, the small repair grant program. And most of what we recommended as far as our approaches to potentially using home funds was really kind of related to the Needham Housing Authority eventual redevelopment of its properties for a handful of home assisted units. So we needed to go through some kind of citizen participation process, and we've included a couple measures at this meeting, including that there would be some presentation on the comp plan and just highlights of the basics.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on this item?
Mr. Chair, I would say that Karen explained some of the struggles we're having with documentation, and given the state of emergency, we expect that that will continue, but we may need to come back to this board in 6 months or so if we can't get these things resolved, and maybe find, talk about some solutions that we might embark on, having the board perhaps help us with writing a letter or making a statement or something like that. So
Thank you.
we'll keep plugging away at it.
That brings us to the 2020 HUD income limits.
Yes, I just wanted to bring to your attention that there have been somewhat, I think, dramatic increases on the HUD income limits. 10% increase between 2018 and 2019, and an 8% increase between 2019 and 2020. And because affordable units are indexed to these income limits, we're talking about in a 2-year period, an 18% increase. And, people, I've been receiving phone call inquiries about people are struggling to stay in some of the 40B units. Now, with this last increase and COVID to boot, we sent letters to the owners of the 3 large 40Bs requesting that they defer any increases in rent during this health crisis. At DHCD also, I think, has been very forceful in communicating with property owners and managers of developments with affordable units to try to really restrict any rent increases during this time. So I thought that it would be useful to make, draw your attention to that issue.
Have you heard anything back from any of the,
No.
because that's a tremendous burden on these folks. Do we have any leverage at all on this? Or should we be contacting our state legislatures?
Well, we don't know if they've in fact done anything. I could easily contact the program managers again and ask what the situation is. I didn't want to do that without your go-ahead, certainly.
Does anybody have a problem with Karen inquiring after the status of this increase? Dan?
I have 2 questions. One is, if Karen knows, or anyone knows, what is the rationale for these increases? Given that the inflation during this last couple of years relatively low. Now, I know real estate values gone up. That's not the issue for this kind of housing, if I would understand it. So do we know anything about why the agents, I assume it's HUD that did this increase.
It's HUD formula.
Driven by, are we able to know what this formula is?
I assume it's like an algorithm that they plug in various factors and
Well, I guess
what comes out.
I'd like to know what the formula, how that formula is calculated. How do we find that out?
We'll find out.
Thank you. And
Any
then
other? Oh, go ahead, Dan.
going to Mo's question, I think as long as we're just very clear, if you, Karen, from my point of view, Mo or others will give you direction, call the person that you wrote to and say, we didn't get an answer back, we're calling, we wanted to know what, if any, action is taken.
Yeah, fine.
Report back to us. We don't have to judge it or decide what to do, but we'd like to know.
Thanks,
Yep.
Dan. Any other questions or comments on this item?
Sense.
I just have a point of
Mary Ann?
clarification.
Oh, so
sorry.
go ahead, Avery. You haven't spoken yet, so I'll give you.
Yeah, just very, very quick. Is this the 18% increase over and then 8% over the last year? Is that, HUD is national. Is that a national figure or is that just for Massachusetts? Because I know some of this is calculated at the state level or even at the local level.
That's for the Boston area. So
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary Ann?
So I also was curious because that rate of increase is kind of shocking and suggests that it's a more market-based number than bearing in anything that I can think about. So I agree with Dan. I'm very interested in understanding what the formula is and what drives that. Because I would have anticipated that increases here would have borne more of a relationship to cost of living in the local area.
Thank you. Matt?
Just based on my experience, Karen, it's based on median income, right, of the Boston area. So the Boston area income increasing dramatically versus your Western Mass, which is a different segment, you wouldn't have that same increase. Is that right?
Well, it's based on percentage of median income for by adjusted by household size for each area. But what median income is, it's not census. I mean, they're using census data in the formula, but the formula is a lot more complicated than just getting some kind of census figure out of there. It's
Got it.
I'd be curious to find out too. Thank you.
And the mystery, as Dan observed, is why are they indexing it to that rather than cost of living?
what? Oh, well, rents and purchase prices are all based on a formula included in state regulations and guidelines, and they've been forever, for as long as these programs have been alive, targeted to changes in area median income as defined by HUD.
Right. But it's a problem, clearly.
Yeah.
Mary Ann, you wanted to say something? Anybody else? All right, that brings us to the 40B guidelines.
Yeah, I had understood that there might be some activity related to updating the 212 local 40B guidelines since the town has surpassed the 10% level. And I think we just wanted to get a sense if that was happening and if, if there's any need for some support in doing so and help. I certainly offer myself. I know Daphne Collins would be interested as well.
I see Dan had his hand or his pencil up, brother.
That's a work in progress. I'm glad that it's here on the agenda, and I hope that it's on the agenda for the next meeting because hopefully there'll have been more progress between now and then. I appreciate Karen and Daphne being available to help, and I will likely need things on the draft that I'm working on. I had actually been kind of chugging along on I'm basically working based on some prior discussions that we've had, working off of the 2012 guidelines to prepare a draft update for discussion, and had been kind of chugging along on that when certain events transpired in March and since then that have kind of gotten ahead of certain things in our work order, as well as reduced our ability to move volume of business. But it is important, and I do have it here, and the fact that it's on the agenda is good because that's an inspiration. I will tell you thematically, because a lot of what I'm working on is mainly in the detail level. Thematically, there's really two elements, and if the board doesn't want them, you guys can speak up, or we can decide, or you want something else, we can talk about it and decide. One is the core element of the 40B guidelines from 2012 was to provide guidance for the town towards the goal established by this board of reaching the 10% SHI countable level. We've done that. And so having done that, one of the reasons to revise this is we have to say, okay, now that we're at 10%, where are we going? And I think there are two elements that I'm building into the draft that, like I say, this is my opinion, but I want you to know where I'm going with this. And we can do it whatever way the board wants, is that the first is to say, all right, now that we're at 10%, what are our standards for new additional 40B applications that may come in now that the board still has a lot of the 40B progress we made was by LIP and other agreed processes that ran under the direction of this board. That seems to me to be a productive direction to continue in, particularly because the board has a lot more leverage now, because dissatisfied applicants cannot simply go to the state appeals process. Second is to look carefully and think how we can proceed to address one element that's in our current mix, which is that although we're at 10% SHI countable, a lot of that 10% consists of units that are actually market rate units that are counted as SHI because of the fact that they're part of 40B developments that we've approved under the regulations, but they are not means tested and not subject to participation in the statewide waiting list or any of the other key elements of the affordable housing goals written big for the state. There's reasons why they're accountable, but they are not by themselves purely, they are not actually affordable per se units.
Dan, I don't want to cut you off, but we have a 7:45, a 5:45 deadline here.
But I just have such a great time working on this, I had to say something. So the
Okay.
goal is to try to figure out how to address the idea of improving our count of means tested units toward the 10%. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Does anybody want to comment on anything Dan said? Matt, keeping in mind that we have a limited time.
Sure. The three issues I see, and this is probably a retreat discussion, is how much more housing do we want? You know, we talk about digesting our current stock. How much are we going to encourage developers to have lit partnerships with us? Are we going to advertise, make that known? Or are we full right now and we have to see what's going to happen? Number two, renting versus owning. Now that we've gotten to the 10%, like Dan was saying, we've done that a lot through rentals and they all count. We want to try to encourage more ownership opportunities under 40B. And third is, to me, the senior piece, 55 and over housing. Where do we stand on allowing those type of developments? So not that we can do anything tonight, but those are the three things that we can talk about, I think, at our retreat or later.
And I think those are all well worth folding into the work that Dan is doing because those are key issues. Anything else on this item before we go to other housing issues and then the minutes? Kate?
Mr. Chair, I would suggest that it would be maybe a good idea for us to meet again in August when we don't have the pressure of the next meeting, and just so we could bring back some of this information for you. Maybe I could get a date out to everybody this week so that we can.
That would be great.
On the schedule.
Appreciate that.
Approving the minutes would be useful, but I think we could save other housing issues because I know you have to get off this call.
Yeah.
And the other call.
All right, so let's defer that and then take the minutes. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes as circulated?
I move that we approve, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Bullion seconds. We'll take a roll call. Ms. Fitzpatrick.
Yes.
Karen, are you a member? I'm sorry.
No.
Staff. John Bullion.
Yes.
Matt Borelli.
Yes.
Dan Matthews.
Yes.
Avery Newton.
Yes.
Mary Ann Cooley.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. That's unanimous. The minutes are approved as submitted. Thank you. No other business before this meeting. We will have another meeting in August. Kate will circulate the date. I declare this meeting adjourned,
You need a motion to.
but I'll take a motion for that.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
Second.
And no discussion on the motion? Mr. Matthews?
Yes.
Ms. Newton?
Yes.
Ms. Cooley?
Yes.
Mr. Bullion?
Yes.
Mr. Borelli?
Yes.
Ms. Fitzpatrick? And the chair votes yes. And the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
your patience.
See you in a minute.
Participation. Yes.
Thank you.
And 5.
Thanks.
Bye now.
Thanks.